The scarred plains of Epsilon VI stretched endlessly beneath the dying light of twin suns. Captain Sarah Chen adjusted her atmospheric suit's filters, watching dust devils dance across the barren landscape. This forgotten world, once a testing ground for the Arcturus Confederation's most ambitious military projects, now served only as a graveyard for failed experiments. Sarah's mission was simple: survey the abandoned research facilities and ensure no dangerous materials remained. Standard protocol for worlds declared uninhabitable after the Arcturus Wars. But as her scanner picked up an anomalous energy signature emanating from a nearby ravine, she knew this wouldn't be a routine sweep. The facility emerged from the rocky terrain like a wound in the earth. Its architecture bore the distinctive angular patterns of Arcturus design, but decades of exposure had left it corroded and partially buried. The main entrance had long since collapsed, but a maintenance shaft offered access to the lower levels. As Sarah descended into the darkness, her suit's lights revealed the story of a hasty evacuation. Scattered datapads, overturned furniture, and the lingering scent of oxidized metal painted a clear picture. Something had gone terribly wrong here. The energy signature grew stronger as she approached the facility's core. Her scanner's display flickered with interference, but the readings were unmistakable. Something alive waited in the depths. Following the winding corridors, she reached a massive chamber that must have served as the main laboratory. There, in a pool of emergency lighting, she found them. A massive creature, nearly 3 meters tall, lay wounded against a shattered stasis pod. Its iridescent scales shifted colors with each labored breath, and 6 eyes tracked Sarah's movement with predatory intelligence. But what caught Sarah's attention were the 2 smaller forms huddled against the creature's side, offspring, barely the size of earth wolves. The adult creature's wounds were severe. Shrapnel from the pod's explosion had torn through its side, and the chamber's failing life support systems weren't helping. Sarah recognized a species from her briefings, a Nexus, one of the Confederation's most ambitious attempts at creating the perfect biological weapon. Designed to be intelligent, adaptable, and lethal, they were supposedly destroyed when the project was abandoned. "Easy there," Sarah whispered, though she knew the creature couldn't understand her. She lowered her weapon, taking a careful step forward. The Nexus tensed, its scales flaring crimson, but it made no move to attack. Whether from weakness or wisdom, it seemed to recognize she wasn't an immediate threat. The offspring whimpered, pressing closer to their parent. They were obviously malnourished, surviving on whatever they could scavenge from the facility's remains. Sarah's orders were clear. Any surviving Arcturus bioweapons were to be terminated immediately. These creatures represented a potential threat to populated worlds. But as she watched the parent Nexus shield its young with its own body, despite its injuries, Sarah saw something the Confederation's scientists had either missed or ignored. These weren't mindless weapons, they were living, feeling beings. The parent's protective instinct, the young one's fear, it was all too familiar. Sarah reached for her med kit, her decision made. "Protocol can go to hell," she muttered, drawing out a regenerative compound. The Nexus watched her every move, its scales shifting to a cautious amber. As she approached with the medicine, its 6 eyes narrowed, but it didn't strike. Perhaps it could sense her intentions, or maybe it was simply too weak to fight. The next few hours were critical. Sarah worked methodically, treating the worst of the wounds while trying to earn the creature's trust. She shared her rations with the offspring, their initial fear gradually giving way to curiosity. The parent Nexus remained alert but allowed her to work, its scales occasionally flickering with ripples of blue, a color Sarah chose to interpret as gratitude. As she finished treating the last of the wounds, Sarah's comm unit crackled to life. "Base to Chen. Status report overdue. Please respond." Sarah looked at the family she'd just saved, knowing that her next words would set in motion events that couldn't be undone. The Confederation would never allow these creatures to live freely. Their very existence challenged everything the military had claimed about the Nexus project. "Chen to base," she responded, her voice steady. "Facility is clear. No survivors found. Requesting permission to initiate demolition sequence. The lie felt heavy on her tongue, but as she watched the young Nexus creatures finally succumb to exhausted sleep beside their heaving parent, she knew it was worth it. She had a plan forming, risky, probably impossible but necessary. These beings deserved more than death or endless imprisonment. The parent Nexus met her gaze, its scales now shimmering with a pattern she hadn't seen before, swirls of silver and deep purple. Understanding passed between them. Whatever came next, they were in it together. Tomorrow, Sarah promised softly, we're getting you out of here. All of you. The Nexus's scales rippled in response, and for a moment, Sarah could have sworn she saw something like hope in those alien eyes. The harsh morning light filtered through the facility's broken skylights as Sarah finalized her preparations. She'd spent the night converting an abandoned cargo transport into a makeshift medical pod, one large enough to hold the Nexus family. The parent creature, whom she'd started calling Nova for its shimmering scales, watched her work with unblinking attention. Nova's wounds had responded well to treatment, though movement clearly caused pain. The offspring, now more confident, shadowed Sarah's every move. Their inquisitive chirps and playful tumbling belied their lethal heritage. She'd named them Echo and Sage, for their matching silver-white and sage-green scale patterns. Base to Chen, multiple unauthorized power signatures detected in your sector. Explain. Sarah's heart raced. She'd hoped for more time. Chen to base, running final system checks before demolition. Power fluctuations are expected. A pause. Too long. Negative, Captain. Hold position. Security team en route for facility inspection. Sarah cursed, abandoning any pretense of stealth. Nova, we need to move. Now. The Nexus understood urgency if nothing else, gathering its offspring with a low rumble. Sarah helped them into the modified transport, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. The facility's ancient systems screamed in protest as she overrode the hangar doors. Sunlight flooded in, along with a storm of red dust. Through her scanner, she spotted 3 approaching shuttles, military-grade, heavily armed. This is Colonel Hayes to Captain Chen. Power down all systems and prepare for inspection. This is a direct order. Sarah activated the transport's engines, watching Nova secure Echo and Sage in the medical cradle she'd fashioned. The parent Nexus's scales had shifted to deep crimson, anticipating battle. Sarah knew that look well enough now to understand. Nova would fight to protect its young, even if it meant dying. I'm sorry, Colonel, Sarah transmitted, but I can't do that. She gunned the engines, the transport lurching toward freedom. Behind them, alarms blared as the facility's automated defense systems activated. Particle beams sliced through the air, missing them by meters. The military shuttles opened fire, but Sarah had counted on their predictability. She dove into a narrow canyon, using the planet's perpetual dust storms as cover. Nova's offspring whimpered, but the parent remained eerily calm, those 6 eyes fixed on Sarah with what seemed like trust. You're harboring Class 1 biological weapons, Captain, Hayes' voice crackled through the comm. Think about what you're doing. Those creatures were designed for one purpose, to kill. Sarah glanced at Nova, who was now gently calming its frightened young. You're wrong, Colonel. They're so much more than weapons, and I won't let you destroy them. The canyon opened into a vast salt flat, offering no cover. Sarah had planned for this, had studied the planet's geological surveys. Beneath these flats lay an extensive cave system, theoretically large enough for their transport. Theoretically. Last warning, Chen. Stop now, or we will use lethal force. Nova's scales suddenly shifted to an intense blue-white, a pattern Sarah hadn't seen before. The Nexus stretched out one clawed hand, touching the transport's navigation console. In that instant, Sarah understood. Nova was showing her something, a way out. Hold tight, Sarah warned, activating the transport's mining laser. The beam cut through the salt crust, revealing the cavern network below. Without hesitation, she plunged their vessel into the darkness, sealing the entrance behind them with a controlled explosion. The caverns were a maze of crystalline formations and underground rivers, but Nova's guidance was unerring. The Nexus possessed some kind of spatial awareness Sarah hadn't known about, leading them through passages barely wide enough for their transport. Hours passed in tense silence, broken only by the occasional chirp from Echo and Sage. When they finally emerged, it was on the planet's dark side, hundreds of kilometers from the facility. The military ships were nowhere in sight. Sarah allowed herself to breathe, running a hand through her sweat-soaked hair. Nova's scales had settled into a calm azure, the offspring finally sleeping after their ordeal. They were safe for now, but Sarah knew this was just the beginning. Her career was over. She'd violated dozens of regulations, directly disobeyed orders, and stolen military property. But watching Nova tend to its young, seeing the intelligence and emotion in those alien eyes, she knew she'd made the right choice. "We need to find somewhere safe," she said aloud, more to herself than her passengers. "Somewhere they'll never think to look for us." Nova's scales flickered with gold speckles, agreement, perhaps, or hope. As their transport limped toward the planet's terminator line, Sarah began composing a message to an old friend, someone who'd witnessed the horrors of the Arcturus Wars firsthand. If anyone would understand why she'd risked everything to save these creatures, it would be Dr. Marcus Jong, the renowned xenobiologist who'd once argued against the very weapons program that had created Nova's species. They had a long journey ahead, but for the first time since finding Nova and the offspring, Sarah felt certain about their path forward. Sometimes, she reflected, the right choice was the one that broke all the rules. Dr. Marcus Jung's hidden research station on Titan's dark side seemed the perfect sanctuary until it wasn't. 3 days after Sarah landed their battered transport, the first military probe appeared in orbit. "They're using quantum tracking," Marcus explained, his weathered face illuminated by monitor glow. "The Nexus creatures emit a unique energy signature. We can mask it temporarily, but not forever." Nova stood protectively over Echo and Sage, who were exploring Marcus's hydroponics lab with childlike wonder. The scientist watched them with fascination, particularly when Nova used its scales to communicate through complex color patterns. "They're more evolved than the original designs," Marcus mused, documenting Nova's interactions. The Arcturus scientists never intended them to develop familial bonds or emotional intelligence. They were supposed to be solitary hunters. Sarah's reply was interrupted by a proximity alarm. 3 Confederation cruisers have entered Titan's atmosphere. "Time's up," she announced, grabbing their emergency supplies. "We need to move." Marcus raised his hand. "Wait, there's something you need to know." He pulled up classified files on his terminal. The Nexus project wasn't just about creating weapons. They were designed as interfaces, living bridges between different forms of consciousness. That's why Nova can communicate so effectively with its offspring, and potentially with us. A massive explosion rocked the station. Through the reinforced windows, Sarah spotted drop ships descending. Nova's scales flared with intense patterns she'd never seen before, and suddenly her mind filled with alien sensations, fear, determination, gratitude. The Nexus was communicating directly with her. "They're not just running from the military," Marcus said urgently. "They're protecting something far more important. The Nexus species could revolutionize how we understand consciousness itself. That's why the Confederation wants them destroyed. They're afraid of what these beings represent." Sarah felt Nova's agreement pulse through their newfound connection. The offspring weren't just children. They were the next evolution of their species, capable of even deeper bonds between consciousnesses. They could bridge the gap between all sentient species if given the chance to survive. The station's defenses wouldn't hold much longer. Marcus led them to a secret hangar where a sleek ship waited. "Take my research vessel," he insisted. "It has experimental stealth systems. I'll hold them off as long as I can." Sarah wanted to argue, but Nova's urgent prompting in her mind made the decision clear. They loaded the offspring into the ship as Marcus initiated his station's self-destruct sequence. "Head for the outer rim," he called. "Find the others." "Others?" Sarah asked, but Marcus was already sealing the hangar doors. Through their connection, Nova shared fragmentary images, more of its kind, hidden throughout the galaxy, waiting to be united. They weren't weapons to be feared, but bridges to be built. Each offspring represented a new possibility for connection between species. As they broke through Titan's atmosphere, Sarah watched the research station erupt in a controlled fusion blast, taking pursuit ships with it. Marcus had given his life to protect not just these creatures, but the future they represented. Nova's scales rippled with determination as they plotted a course for deep space. Through their mental link, Sarah understood their next mission: find the scattered Nexus survivors and create a sanctuary where all species could learn to truly communicate and understand each other. The Confederation ships would keep hunting them, but now they had purpose beyond mere survival. Echo and Sage weren't just offspring to be protected, they were the first of a new generation that could change the galaxy's future. As their ship disappeared into the star-filled darkness, Sarah felt Nova's consciousness brush against hers once more, sharing not just thoughts but a vision. A future where barriers between species dissolved, where understanding replaced fear, and where the bridges they would build could span the gaps between all sentient minds. The hunt was far from over, but now they were no longer just fugitives. They were pioneers. Their ship dropped out of hyperspace near the abandoned mining colony of New Vega, where debris fields offered natural camouflage. Sarah had learned to interpret Nova's color patterns with increasing accuracy. Right now, the Nexus was projecting anticipation tinged with concern. Through their strengthening mental link, Nova shared images of others like itself, hidden in the asteroid belt ahead. But something was wrong. The usual background hum of distant Nexus consciousness felt muted, distorted. They found the reason why in a massive hollowed-out asteroid. A group of resistance fighters, led by a former Confederation scientist named Dr. Elena Rossi, had established a sanctuary for engineered beings. But recent Confederation raids had left them vulnerable. "We've been tracking your escape," Elena explained, leading them through corridors filled with various engineered species. "When we learned a human had chosen to protect a Nexus family, we knew we had to help." Echo and Sage rushed to greet other young Nexus in the facility, their scales creating intricate patterns of joy. Nova's colors shifted to deep purple, relief at finding more of their kind, but also worry. Through their connection, Sarah understood. This sanctuary was impressive, but it wouldn't stay hidden for long. The Confederation isn't just hunting them anymore, Elena revealed, showing them classified documents. They're trying to replicate the Nexus consciousness bridging abilities artificially. If they succeed, they'll have the ultimate weapon, the power to control any sentient mind. Sarah felt Nova's fierce rejection of this idea. The Nexus weren't meant to dominate consciousness, but to connect it. Their offspring represented an evolution toward even greater harmony between species. A young resistance fighter burst into the room. Confederation fleet detected. Multiple dreadnoughts, closing fast. Elena's face hardened. "They followed your quantum trail. We need to evacuate." But Nova had another idea, sharing it simultaneously with Sarah and the other Nexus present. The offspring weren't just the next generation. They were the key to amplifying their species' natural abilities. Together, they could create a consciousness network powerful enough to show the Confederation the truth. "They want to transform our abilities into a weapon," Sarah translated for Elena. "Instead, we'll show them what real connection means." As evacuation alarms blared, the adult Nexus gathered their offspring in a circle. Sarah felt Nova's invitation. They needed a human consciousness to complete the bridge. The risk was enormous. Total mental connection could overwhelm her mind. But seeing Echo and Sage, their scales shimmering with trust, she made her choice. As Confederation ships breached the asteroid's defensive perimeter, Sarah joined the circle. What followed transcended language. Through the combined power of mature Nexus and their evolved offspring, amplified by the Sanctuary's unique properties, they created something unprecedented, a galaxy-wide consciousness bridge. For a brief, stunning moment, every mind in range, including the Confederation forces, experienced true connection. They felt the Nexus's desire for harmony, the offspring's potential for fostering understanding, and the simple truth: consciousness was meant to be bridged, not controlled. When the connection faded, the Confederation fleet hung motionless in space. On every channel, the same message repeated: stand down. The true purpose of the Nexus project had finally been understood. Sarah helped Nova stand, both of them exhausted but triumphant. Echo and Sage rushed to them, their scales pulsing with iridescent joy. Through their permanent connection, Sarah felt Nova's satisfaction. They had achieved something unprecedented, the first step toward a truly united galaxy. Elena was already coordinating with sympathetic Confederation officers, negotiating terms for the Sanctuary's protection. The Nexus would no longer be seen as weapons, but as teachers, helping different species understand each other at the deepest level. As Sarah watched Echo and Sage play with their newfound companions, she realized they had done more than save a few remarkable beings. They had opened the door to a future where boundaries between species could dissolve, replaced by true understanding. Nova's scales shimmered with a new color, one Sarah had never seen before, but instantly understood: hope. The Sanctuary became more than a refuge. It evolved into an interstellar diplomatic center. But peace remained fragile. Hardline Confederation factions still viewed the Nexus as threats, and they were gathering forces for one final attempt to end what they couldn't control. Sarah monitored the defense grid as Nova trained the offspring to strengthen their consciousness-bridging abilities. Echo and Sage had grown remarkably, their skills surpassing even the adult Nexus. They could now link minds across vast distances, creating networks of understanding between diverse species. The attack came at dawn. A massive fleet, led by Admiral Crane, a notorious hardliner, dropped out of hyperspace. Their weapons were specifically designed to disrupt the Nexus's neural networks. "Surrender the creatures," Crane demanded, "or we'll destroy everything." Through their link, Nova shared a plan. The offspring had discovered they could do more than bridge minds. They could share memories, experiences, entire lifetimes of understanding. It was time to show Crane's forces the complete truth. As the fleet opened fire, all 23 Nexus offspring, led by Echo and Sage, formed a consciousness web more powerful than any before. Sarah and Nova joined them, their minds becoming conduits for the largest telepathic event in history. Every person in Crane's fleet experienced the Nexus's entire journey. Their creation, their suffering, their evolution beyond warfare into beings of connection and peace. They felt the joy of the offspring discovering their true purpose, the power of bridges built between different forms of consciousness. But Crane's hatred ran too deep. He ordered his flagship to fire its main cannon, aiming to destroy the Sanctuary's core. Nova reacted instantly, its scales blazing with protective fury. Through their link, Sarah felt its intention, a desperate plan to redirect the energy using the offspring's combined abilities. The beam struck Nova's protective field. For a moment, everything hung in balance. Then, channeling the combined power of all linked consciousness, Nova transformed the destructive energy into a wave of pure understanding that swept through the fleet. Crane's own crew turned against him, finally comprehending the magnitude of what they'd nearly destroyed. The hardline faction's support crumbled as the truth spread throughout the Confederation. But the victory came at a cost. Nova's scales, once brilliantly iridescent, had faded to a pale shimmer. The effort of redirecting such massive energy had taken its toll. Through their link, Sarah felt Nova's life force ebbing. Echo and Sage rushed to their parent, their scales pulsing with healing energy. Other Nexus joined them, forming a circle of regenerative power. Sarah added her own consciousness to their effort, offering her strength through their unbreakable bond. For 3 days, they worked to save Nova. During that time, the Confederation officially recognized a sanctuary's sovereignty and the Nexus's rights as sentient beings. The war was over, but Nova's fate hung in the balance. On the 4th day, Nova's scales finally flickered with color, weak but alive. Through their connection, Sarah felt its gratitude and something more: pride. Not just in surviving, but in showing the galaxy a better way forward. The offspring had proved that understanding could triumph over fear, that bridges were stronger than weapons. As Nova recovered, surrounded by its growing, thriving species, Sarah realized they had achieved something even greater than survival. They had sparked an evolution in consciousness itself, opening doors to possibilities no one had imagined possible. The future would bring new challenges, but they would face them together, their minds linked in a harmony of understanding that transcended species, transcended fear, transcended the very barriers that had once divided them. 2 years after the battle at the Sanctuary, Sarah stood before the Interstellar Council, Nova by her side. The chamber was filled with representatives from 100 worlds, all connected through the consciousness-bridging network the Nexus had helped establish. Echo and Sage, now fully grown, led a new generation of consciousness facilitators. They traveled between worlds, helping species overcome centuries of misunderstanding through direct mental connection. Their success had transformed galactic society, replacing suspicion with empathy, fear with understanding. The Sanctuary had evolved into the Consciousness Academy, where beings from across the galaxy came to learn the art of mental bridging. Nova, fully recovered, served as its primary teacher, its scales now displaying patterns of wisdom gained through near-death and renewal. The Nexus Initiative has exceeded all expectations, Sarah reported to the Council. Diplomatic incidents have decreased by 80%. Trade disputes are resolved through shared understanding rather than force. Even long-standing enemies have found common ground through consciousness bridging. Through their permanent link, Nova shared memories of their journey, from the desperate escape to this moment of triumph. But it also shared a vision of what came next, expanding the network to reach isolated species, healing ancient wounds between civilizations, building bridges across the gaps of space and understanding. The Council voted unanimously to establish similar academies throughout the galaxy. The offspring of that first rescued family would lead the way, carrying their gift of connection to the farthest reaches of known space. As Sarah and Nova left the chamber, they found Echo and Sage waiting. Their scales rippled with excitement as they shared news of a discovered signal, another group of engineered beings, far beyond the galaxy's edge, reaching out for connection. Sarah felt Nova's response through their link, ready for a new adventure. They had started as fugitives, become pioneers, and emerged as architects of a new way of being. Yet their greatest journey, the exploration of consciousness itself, was just beginning. That evening, watching the sunset from the Academy's observation deck, Sarah reflected on how far they'd come. Nova's scales shimmered with contentment as Echo and Sage demonstrated their latest discoveries to a group of eager students. Through their shared consciousness, Sarah felt the ripple of connection extending across space, countless minds learning to reach out, to understand, to bridge the gaps between them. They had done more than save a species. They had awakened the galaxy to its own potential for unity. As the stars emerged above them, Sarah felt Nova's quiet certainty. This wasn't an ending, but a beginning. The real story, the story of a truly connected galaxy, was just starting to unfold.